Hey everyone, this is Fabio and welcome back to a new video. More specifically, welcome back to a game discussion video. I know I haven't done one of this in a long time, but considering today's topic, I think it's worth it to spend some time on it and various things connected to it. And we're going to talk about the latest game that I finished, which is, of course, the amazing Resident Evil 3 remake on the PS4, obviously. How did this happen? Very easily, actually. A couple of months ago, even I think 3 months ago or something like that, I was finally done with Treasure Cold Steel 4, of course. And after a 110 or something hours RPG, especially as over the top as Treasure Cold Steel is, I really needed a break from JRPGs. Okay, I need a palate cleanser, something completely different and short and ideally silly to recover my energies. And I had there Resident Evil 5 on PS4, and I thought, well, that's perfect. So I played that, had fun, and thank God I spent only €5 for it, because otherwise I wouldn't be as pleased, because it's not a very good Resident Evil game. But I had fun with it. But the important thing is that Resident Evil 5 was kind of, the snowball that started the avalanche, because it kind of rekindled my love for this series, which has been really dormant for the past, 2 or 3 generations of gaming. Because the last time I played a sort of new Resident Evil game was with the Wii, when I played Resident Evil 4 and especially Resident Evil 1 Remake, which is phenomenal. And as I said, it's been such a long time, and even though 5, it's nothing special, it's like, I kind of miss Resident Evil. But then I said, I played my fix of Resident Evil for the year, I'm good to go. But again, as I was visiting a GameStop here in town, I was able to find this for €20, and how could I say no? I mean, it's the remake of my favorite game in the series, my co-favorite survival horror of all time. Since this was announced, I said, well, I have to play it, I have to at least own it, even if I'm not going to play it, which I was like, I'm sure it's going to happen, but I'm not in a hurry because I already played the original game. But I have to say, thank God that I played it, because it's so good. But the thing is, everything started because of a mod, which is the cool thing about it. You see, as I said, I already played Resident Evil 5. I was good with Resident Evil, at least for quite a while. But then I was just vegging out on YouTube, and I saw a video which absolutely very magnetically caught my attention. And that was someone playing Resident Evil 3 Remake, but with Jill Valentine modded to look as Regina from Dino Crisis. So obviously the effect was like this, because I am a huge fan of Resident Evil 3, and I am a die-hard Dino Crisis fan. So of course I watched it. This guy finished the game in 2 hours. It was quite impressive, to say. Knowing now how the game is, not so much, because I can see that happening. But I immediately say, okay, I have to play the game, because I knew, of course, that I didn't have the mod for Regina, which I would love to have it, to be honest. I would absolutely love it, but I don't know how to do it. Regardless of this, okay, I'm going to play this game. The interesting thing about this Resident Evil 3 remake, it's the amount of negativity, which I think last year when it was released surrounded it. I mean, this game was teared down by people. And now that I've played it, I honestly don't understand why. I would say the most 2 common complaints were it's not very long, which, how is this negative? Do you want to play a 50 hours Resident Evil game? Are you insane? And B, of course, is Jill Valentine's model, because it's not sexualized enough, I guess, even though I think she looks gorgeous in the game. But let's go with some order. Like, the game is not long enough. It took me between 6 and 7 hours to finish it. I was very satisfied with it. I mean, it's a perfect length for a Resident Evil game. Have you ever played a Resident Evil game, guys? They're not long, you know? They feel longer than what they actually are. So, in order to discuss this matter a little more, because I find it interesting since apparently it's one of the reasons the game sucks, because it's short, I decided to tackle this through science, like perfect science. So I went to How Long to Beat and compare the timings they suggest for the various Resident Evil games. So undisputed science. Obviously, these are average times. They're not 100% correct. Because every gameplay is going to be different. As I said, depending on how much you explore the game. And remember, with Resident Evil games, usually there's a lot of replayability. For example, in my case, once I finished the game, I immediately restarted it. A, because I loved it. B, because I wanted to retry it again and do a little faster. It's fun to play with weapons with unlimited ammunition. So as I said, there is quite some replayability value with the Resident Evil games, traditionally. And I think I'm going to replay even a third time. That's primarily because I loved it. And it's Resident Evil 3, it's the original. It's one of the games I've replayed the most in my life. Even though I find it fascinating because I don't replay games usually, but survival horror, because they're short, for example, are always a good pick to me. And they're so much fun. But let's look at times. So the main problem, for what I understand, it's the fact that Resident Evil 3 Remake is shorter than Resident Evil 2 Remake. Therefore, it sucks. It's not good enough. So according to How Long to Beat, as I said, science, on average, Resident Evil 2 Remake, the normal gameplay, it's not plus extra content or completionist, 8.5 hours. Fair enough. It took me 7 hours to finish Resident Evil 3, so we're talking about an hour of difference. So wait a second. So the game sucks because it's 1 hour shorter than the previous one. That's interesting. Let's look at the older one. I mean, we all love the original Resident Evil trilogy. Resident Evil 1, again, on average, 6.5 hours. Resident Evil 2, come on, 2 discs, 2 different stories, 6 hours. So it's shorter than the original one. Resident Evil 3, again, it has to be shorter, 6.5 hours again. So it's longer, technically, which is interesting. Of course, I'm just exaggerating because it's How Long to Beat. I know it took me longer to play Resident Evil 2 back in the day. I think, I'm not sure, but there you go. But again, there is a trend here. These games are short. Again, complaining that Resident Evil 3, it's 7 hours long. It doesn't feel right to me because, again, traditionally these games have always been short. They're not long. Most of the time that we're adding, it's, for the most part, it's like post-game stuff. It's like game plus or stuff like that. And it's the replayability that adds hours. As I said, at least you spent 50 hours with Resident Evil 2 remakes because you feel the need to explore every nooks and cranny and you rushed through Resident Evil 3. Well, that's on you. But don't complain and say the game is bad because it's not very long. But the best thing about this scientific experiment is I was looking like, okay, which one is the longest? And that is amazing. That's a very interesting discovery because according to How Long to Beat, the longest Resident Evil game is, of course, Resident Evil 6 with 21.5 hours for the normal gameplay, which I was like, oh my god, that's a long time for a Resident Evil game. But I just love it. Coincidentally, the game that most fans despise and say it's the worst in the series, it's also the longest. Some food for thoughts there. But again, so I don't see the length of the game as a problem. For what I understand, it's just primarily a comparison with Resident Evil 2 Remake. I haven't played Resident Evil 2 Remake yet. I will eventually, of course, but I don't think it's going to cloud my judgment of 3 for what it is. Because, of course, I still remember Resident Evil 3, the original, was much shorter than Resident Evil 2, and I still prefer it by a long shot. I think Resident Evil 3, as I said, this game right here, Resident Evil 3, it's my favorite in the series. I mean, I prefer 1 over 2, if I have to be honest. And 4, one of the fan favorites, it's one of my least favorites, to be honest. However, the other complaint is, of course, Jill Valentine, because she doesn't look exactly like she was in the original. And at the end of the day, it's like, who cares? Who cares? Sure, she doesn't have the miniskirt. You can unlock that if you pre-order the game, I believe. Good for you. I really didn't care about it. I think she looks great. And boy, she goes through a lot in this game, just like in the original. But because the game looks so incredibly good, it feels more real in a way. All the abuse that she takes, it feels so much painful going through all of that. But that's what makes Jill one of the greatest characters of all time. I mean, always had a huge crush on Jill Valentine when I was younger. Absolutely loved her. Easily, obviously, the best character in Resident Evil. Also, but again, I think these are the main problems that people had. As a length, which it sounds really silly, to be honest, and of course the character of Jill. I remember watching a video which is all about, obviously, these obvious videos on YouTube. It's like Resident Evil 3 Remake is a disgrace. It's like, okay. And of course, it was one of those that complained from beginning to end about everything, and even the smallest details. Of course, nothing works. For example, it was complaining that Nemesis comes out very, very soon, basically immediately in the game, while in the original, there is a bit of a build-up. They're both fine, in my opinion. It's just not to defend at all costs the remake, because I liked the way they introduced Nemesis right on. They don't waste any time. It's immediately chasing you, and I like that. The first chase the first chase scene in the game, it's a lot of fun. Again, it's very tense. I think, just like in the original game, every time you hear Nemesis music, you know, oh shit, it's gonna come, and there it is. And yeah, let's talk about Nemesis, because just as in the original, I mean, man, it's the greatest survival horror villain of all time to me. There's no questions about it. It was a brilliant idea in the original already, to have this big thing chasing you and you know that you cannot really stop it. It's genius. It increases the tension tenfold, I think. Of course, in the original, you also have tank controls, which made everything harder and more challenging. And I love that. But also in this one, it was so cool. Every time Nemesis jumps at you, I was like, oh, it's on now. And there are so many scenes when, I don't know, when either Nemesis or something else kill me in one hit. I was like, oh shit. But you learn from that, of course, because there's a lot of trial and errors in this game, and I got better immediately, and I loved it. But I always loved the concept of Nemesis, and it's something that Capcom has come back to it since it introduced it. I mean, they're still doing that. Look at Resident Evil 8. You got the big lady following you around, and that's basically the idea of Nemesis. And it's something that I think perhaps Resident Evil 3 was inspired by the T-Rex in Dino Crisis. Again, the same thing. You have this huge thing, and you cannot do anything following you, and it can kill you in one hit. Because I don't remember Resident Evil 2, the original, doing that. Because, of course, I played that ages ago, but I don't remember Mr. X being so prevalent in the original game. I remember him in a small part of a Claire campaign, but that's it. And then he's there at the end, of course. But I think they implemented him much, much more in the remake, which makes sense, of course. But again, look at that. It's just a sort of Nemesis. This tyrant, if you will, thing following you as, again, you cannot do much about it until the end. And yeah, when you kill Nemesis at the end, it feels so good to see Jill with that huge railgun thing. It's so over the top. I love it. But let's talk about the game a little bit. Obviously, the first thing I have to say, it's the graphics. I mean, this might be the best looking game I've played so far. It's incredible. Absolutely stunning. It's almost like watching a movie again, which is something I don't really care. But again, I appreciate the good looking game, of course, and nothing can touch this at the moment because I don't even own a PS5. So on my PS4, nothing compares to this. Gameplay-wise, it's still a sort of gameplay inspired by Resident Evil 4 onwards, which I'm not a huge fan of it, but it's fun. Because you cannot have a tank control game in this day and age. I know that. But for what it is, this sort of point and shoot kind of thing, I like it. It's fun. And it works very well in here. There is a great selection of weapons, of course. So again, gameplay-wise, it's a lot of fun to play this. And it worked better than Resident Evil 5, which is much closer to 4. So it's like Jill, it's a bit slower, but you have good controls. It's kind of fluid in terms of movement. You can dodge attacks, but you need the right timing because otherwise it can be a disaster, which happens sometimes, especially by the later part of the game when you are in the hospital and those hunters are running around. Yeah, you have to time your moves very, very good, very wisely. Also, like music, it's really good. For example, there's so much nostalgia in the soundtrack of this game. For example, when you're in the police station as Carlos, and there is the safe room close to the dark room in there, to hear the small police, like the save room theme with the piano, it's super nostalgic. But of course, like the biggest nostalgia moment for me was the end credit song, which is the same as the original. Oh man, you could see like the small tear coming down my cheek listening to that glorious song. And also something that I haven't mentioned earlier, like when speaking about Jill Valentine and Nemesis, but also the other characters have been improved, I think, from the original, especially Carlos and Nikolai. Carlos has much more of a personality because in the original he's there, but that's kind of it. In here he has a slightly bigger part. I mean, you go through the police station and the hospital as him. And of course there's Nikolai, which is the same son of a bitch than in the original. But again, he has a slightly bigger role, which was more than welcome. He's a great villain. Something that I didn't expect, for example. In the final confrontation, when he's holding Carlos hostage and you have to shoot him, like I was trying to point correctly, but it took me a bit longer than necessary. And there is a cutscene in which Nikolai wins, which is awesome. It's like he does a sort of move, he cuts Carlos' throat and throws the knives just in the middle of Jill's head. It was awesome. I didn't expect that. For example, that was awesome. So yeah, I think like the main characters of this game have been improved quite a bit from the original. And this leads me connected to the previous observation of the Regina mod. Playing this game made me think so much about Dino Crisis. It's inevitable. Because Resident Evil 3, to me, has always had a sort of connection to Dino Crisis. Especially because if you play the original and you finish it, one of the costumes that you can unlock is the Regina costume. And I, of course, replayed the game so many times as Regina. And unfortunately, this is a feature that they didn't add in the remake, which it would have been like a proper like nerdgasm if they would have added Regina costume officially, but obviously they did, because Dino Crisis is basically dead for Capcom. And that's the sad thing, because to me, it would be the easier thing in the world for Capcom to remake those games. I don't understand why they keep dragging their feet with Dino Crisis. To me, at least, and I don't work at Capcom, so I have no idea. But it seems like a very easy thing to do. Just use the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes engine, which is amazing, and add it to Dino Crisis. Use the same gameplay as 3, add some story sections here and there. For example, in the original game on the PS1, they wanted to have an entire section in the jungle, but they couldn't do it due to technical limitations. Now, of course they can. Between the PS4 and PS5, they can do whatever they want. So just imagine a Dino Crisis 1 remake looking like Resident Evil 2 and 3. It would be unbelievable. And I'm sure they're going to sell well because Dino Crisis has a strong and still loyal fan base. And in general, survival horror games are kind of popular now. So I'm sure a well-made Dino Crisis remake will make quite a buck for Capcom. And even Dino Crisis 2, if done right, don't do the whole shooter thing like the original. Because Dino Crisis 2, it's a fun sequel, but it could have been so much better if it would have been a proper survival horror game. So again, implement a bit the story sections, have a proper survival horror gameplay, use the same engine, and there you go. Again, it's not that hard to me. And obviously stay away as much as possible for that pile of donkey shit that is Dino Crisis 3 on Xbox. Don't touch that, of course. And again, if you can make enough interest and money with the 2 remakes, then maybe you can make a proper final chapter, aka Dino Crisis 4, or just call it 3 and ignore the original 3. Which again, thinking about it, how hard can it be? The thing with Dino Crisis is that because it has the dinosaurs, so it all has to do with dinosaurs, it's kind of limits a little bit what you can do in terms of enemies. Because with zombies and monsters, you can just go as crazy as you want. It's really not a problem. Just create the most fucked up thing and you're okay. With dinosaurs, you're a bit confined to that. Otherwise, just go crazy. Just create like human dinosaurs, mutations, or some nonsense like that. Who cares? It's a Capcom horror game. They are B-horror movies, so just go crazy. As long as the story and the characters are cool, and of course it is. It's Dino Crisis. It's friggin' Regina. Of course she's cool. She's the coolest of them all. So I don't know. It's something that I always connect Dino Crisis with Resident Evil because Capcom is squeezing Resident Evil as much as they can. They made an infinity of games. And I'm saying this as a big-time fan. I've been there since the beginning. They kind of lost me during the PS2, PS3 era. But I always liked it. I always enjoyed it. But it's kind of annoying to see that they're releasing so many games while they have a potential pile of gold beneath the shit of the 3rd game, but with Dino Crisis. And they never touched it. I think it's kind of official that they'll never do anything with it. Or at least not in the next future. Probably it will not happen. It will never happen. It's a shame, but it's Capcom. What can we do? If it's not Street Fighter or Resident Evil, they're not going to release it, probably. But we'll see. I hope to be wrong. They released, well, Devil May Cry, it's a big series, so. But that's the thing with Capcom that at times drives me crazy. They have one of the best catalog in gaming, and they just, not even scratching, they're just touching the very, very top of it, which is called Resident Evil. They're doing a phenomenal job with it. I mean, if Resident Evil 2 is just as good as this, well, apparently according to fans, it's better, but we'll see. I'm sure Resident Evil 7 and 8 are good. I will play them eventually. I also want to play 6 out of curiosity and for completionist sake. Because recently I look at it and my Resident Evil collection, it's one of the biggest I have, so it's impressive. And now in a way, like, I want all the Resident Evil games I can find, the decent one. I don't care about the light gun games or something like that. That what was called like Resident Evil Survivor or something, those awful first-person light gun games on PS1. God, I will not touch those. But I want to play, out of curiosity, Resident Evil 6. I'm very curious about 7 and 8. I know they're working on 9, of course. I will not play Resident Evil 4 Remake. I don't care about that game. And we'll see where they will go with this. They will keep making Resident Evil as forever, basically, because there will always be a market for these games. And I'm happy because I'm a fan. But just give Dino Crisis a chance, damn it. It's Dino Crisis 1, it's, to me, the best survival horror game I ever played, together with Resident Evil 3. But in conclusion, just like, I had such a blast with Resident Evil 3 Remake. It's easily the surprise of the year to me. I loved every second of this game. Honestly, I don't really understand the negativity and criticism surrounded it. But at the end of the day, also, like, it's a Resident Evil game. What were you expecting? Like, you're not going to find the meaning of life in this. You're just going to have a fun time with a gorgeous-looking survival horror game. So that should be it for me, guys. Hope you enjoyed this. Thanks so much for watching, and take care.